Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Dr. O'Carroll, for your report and indeed for all the work that you do, and for everybody that works with you as well. It's incredible. We're all humbled, to be honest, by it. And I do acknowledge as well that in your report you say that Ireland can be, very proud of our response to COVID-19. I think you can be very proud, and I think everybody who works with you can be very proud. It was a tremendous response, and it's one that we need to sustain. I agree with you. I also completely agree with your conclusions there that it has to all start with housing. The inequalities that are created by homelessness, by housing poverty, we have to address those root causes. So no dispute at all, and that is this government's top priority. In terms of your report, and you talk about collecting the data and the fact that this is an interim report because the data that's available to you is incomplete. And you suggest that a database of should be created, to capture and report on the deaths. Who do you think is best? Which organisation do you think is best positioned to capture that data? Is it the DRHE? Is it the coroners? So I'd like if you could just advise us on that. When we talk about homelessness and when we talk about this segment of homelessness, deaths in homelessness, homelessness is disproportionately, males are disproportionately represented in the homeless population. Single males are further disproportionately represented in the homeless population generally. And really sadly, in this report, that trend is absolutely mirrored. And it's really alarming to see this crisis for males. And I do think as a society we have to accept that and recognise it, and we need to address it because it's stark. It really is stark that 3/4 of the homeless population is male, single male, and then again 33 of the 44 single deaths that are reported you report on are male, so 75%. And I suppose beyond addressing housing, which absolutely there's just no dispute about that. That's why I'm not focusing on it. But I'm wondering if, as a society, we need to explore this issue more. What are we doing with supporting young men, boys, to become young men, and what is it that is making them so vulnerable and so susceptible to this terrible crisis? I also just want to ask you, and when I look at, there was the report yesterday focusing on homelessness, and that had a 5-year view on it, and it also talked about, and in Dublin in particular, we've a big issue with again, the predominantly single homelessness, the male homelessness, but also this issue that in Dublin, homeless people stay in emergency accommodation longer than in any other part of the country, exceeding 6 months easily. And your data shows us that those who remain in emergency accommodation longer are more vulnerable to increased mental health issues and death ultimately. So I suppose, do you think in Dublin, and we see this a lot, there's two political arguments going on. One is the argument around the building of single units, and there's a lot of campaigning around we need family accommodation, which of course we do, but most of our built housing stock is already family accommodation, and it's difficult to push the argument for good quality single accommodation, which is desperately needed if we are to deliver on housing first. And I'd like your view on that. And the second is that and you know this, in our constituency, we have a predominance of emergency accommodation, and I would consider it a substandard form of accommodation. I appreciate it meets a need in an emergency, but it's not suitable for long-term accommodation. And
Senator, there's just 1 minute remaining in your slot.
I'll be very short. And in the interim, we need, what is your view on us taking long-term leases to actually meet and provide suitable accommodation for a secure period of time, 25 years? For the City Council has done this, and I'd be interested in your view on that as well. And thank you so much for coming here today.
Dr. O'Carroll, you just have half a minute left, unfortunately, to get through all of that, but you might get through other questions later on with other speakers.
Okay, Senator Fitzpatrick, thanks very much. Just the DRHE, I think the people, you would still need, they would collect the data and they could use data analysis to look at the data. They also could work with the coroner as well as do the critical incident analysis. In terms of males, I think it's multiple issues. I think poverty is a significant part. Males in poverty are often isolated. They don't have familial roles, often particularly with single parenthood. Also, drug addiction tends to affect males more often than women. So I think that's why they end up more like that. In terms of the single homeless longer periods of time, again in Dublin, I think unfortunately drug addiction is a much more significant cause effect on homelessness in Dublin. And I think drug addiction and mental health illness are probably the two determinants of long-term homelessness. Singles accommodation, I think there's always a crux between, do you get singles accommodation or do you get housing? I suppose I would favour putting the investment in housing over a good singles accommodation, though I do agree with you that we need to have a certain standards of singles accommodation that people can survive, particularly if they are going to be long term. But the focus should be on housing rather than accommodation.
Thank you, Dr. O'Carroll.
Thank you very much.